Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight on this Wednesday, September 25th.
It's just a Democrat witch hunt. Here we go again.
How the Trump impeachment inquiry is likely to play with Democrat and GOP supporters.
It's not entirely clear what that process would look like.
How does impeachment actually work and what's traditionally been the political fallout? And former Mayor Rahm Emanuel shares impeachment insights from his stints as a White House insider. Alexa and Google Assistants can now help you get a job at McDonald's. That and more of the day's top business stories from Cranes. Police departments and divorce attorneys are collecting personal data from iPass users. We learn how and why it is legal.
There's always something going on in my district.
The Feds zero in on another powerful Chicago politician. Our Spotlight Politics team dives in.
You know, I could practically put on the show by myself. Like, I know that I can handle this. And then we get in line.
In line for the hottest ticket in town, but not much longer.
It's a wonderful way of taking the energy that we have in the building in DC out into the community.
And the Smithsonian makes a stop in Chicago with their Museum on Wheels. We give you a tour. All that and more next on Chicago Tonight. Thanks for joining us, I'm Phil Ponce. In a moment, we'll hear from former Mayor Rahm Emanuel and others on the impeachment inquiry. But first, tonight's support for impeachment of President Donald Trump has grown among Democrats and Congress after the release today of the president's phone call with Ukraine's president. That release reveals Trump asked Ukraine's leader to look into Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden and his son Hunter Biden. Now that an official inquiry has been launched, how exactly does impeachment work and what are the next steps? Paris Schutz has the latest. Paris, what can you tell us?
Phil, there is a lot unknown about this process, chiefly because the Constitution leaves a lot of it up to the imagination. We do know that Article 2, Section 4 says, quote, the President, Vice President, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for and convicted of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. We also know that 3 presidents have faced some form of impeachment proceedings. Andrew Johnson, who was impeached but not removed, Richard Nixon, who resigned before impeachment articles were brought before Congress, and Bill Clinton, 98, who was impeached in the House but then again not removed. He was acquitted in the Senate. So what happens now? Well, the committees that are investigating under the auspices of impeachment can bring articles of impeachment before the House and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. A simple majority would be needed to approve the articles of impeachment and send it over to the Senate, where a trial would happen. And the rules are very vague, other than the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court would preside over this trial.
Well, there's not a lot of precedent for this. The Senate can make its own rules in terms of how it's going to operate the trial. There are even questions about whether it has to have a trial at all, or whether either the majority leader could simply decide not to bring it to the floor, or if it was brought to the floor, it could be immediately dismissed on a motion, some kind of motion to dismiss. Those are open questions.
It would then take a 2/3 majority in the Senate to convict and remove from office, in which case the vice president assumes power.
Does the formal announcement of an impeachment inquiry give the Congress more powers?
Well, as we mentioned, Phil, there are these investigations in 6 committees that have been ongoing, looking into many aspects of the president, his personal finances, trying to get his tax returns, whether he's violated the emoluments clause of the Constitution by enriching himself or his family through some of his properties around the world, and then some aspects of the Mueller probe. So in many of these instances, the administration has fought back subpoenas in court and has simply refused to acknowledge subpoenas in other instances. So Supreme Court expert Carolyn Shapiro, whom you just heard from, says that by folding all this into the umbrella of impeachment, it could give Congress a better chance to have federal judges enforce subpoenas.
What the court would look at is where is Congress getting its authority to issue the subpoena? And it would, in this instance, the Congress would say, well, we have the power, we have the sole power of impeachment, which must mean we have the power to investigate, because we can't decide whether or not to hold impeachment without an investigation. And I think that a court would then look to see if there was some relationship between the subpoena and the power being asserted.
Paris, since the Republican Party holds the majority in the Senate and many have come out strongly supporting the president today, is this a futile exercise?
Well, it makes it an exercise at this point, Phil, in politics. I mean, unless there's more information that comes out that puts more Republicans in the camp of supporting impeachment or removal, then it's going to stay a political exercise. Both Democrats and the president may try to use this to their political advantage. The president's campaign re-election chairman came out and said they've raised millions and millions of dollars since House Speaker Pelosi announced impeachment. And so all of this could be used to stoke each respective base in the next election.
The political stakes involve what happens in 2020 and what is the dominant narrative that comes out of these impeachment hearings. Is the dominant narrative about Democrats harassing a duly elected and democratically elected president and making it impossible for him to do his job? Or is the dominant narrative one of a president who's unhinged, who's using the powers of his office for his own narrow electoral gains?
And we mentioned President Clinton's impeachment, but then lack of removal from office. A lot of people talk about the fact that he had high approval ratings going in, high approval ratings going out. But Professor Howell from U of C there says that the Democratic Party did suffer politically as a result.
Clinton's approval ratings didn't change that much, and that's true. But Democrats suffered mightily over the course of Clinton's time in office. They lost both chambers of Congress in 1994. They lost additional seats moving forward, and then they lost the White House in 2000 when he wasn't up for re-election, and yet the economy was humming, and Al Gore, his VP, couldn't win office.
And at least in the Chicago area, all 12 congressional Democrats have supported some form of impeachment proceeding here. No Republican members of Congress have.
Paris, thank you. And we're back with former Mayor Rahm Emanuel and his take on the impeachment inquiry right after this.
Don't ever miss Chicago Tonight. Subscribe to our podcast. Get a daily download of our show delivered to your desktop or mobile device. Go to WTTW.com/Chicago Tonight Podcast and subscribe.
There are many unresolved questions about the rapidly unfolding impeachment inquiry, how quickly the House of Representatives will move, whether the Republican-held Senate will drag its feet on a possible trial, and how the Trump administration will react. Our next guest has experienced how it feels inside a White House facing the threat of impeachment. Rahm Emanuel, former mayor of Chicago, who was senior advisor to President Bill Clinton from 1993 to 1998. He was a senior advisor to Clinton when Clinton was facing possible impeachment and left the White House shortly after the House voted to impeach. He also served in Congress and was chief of staff for President Barack Obama. And Rahm Emanuel, welcome back to Chicago Tonight. Appreciate you being here. First of all, do you support the impeachment inquiry?
Yes.
Why is that?
Well, first of all, unlike everything prior to this, this is an act in the White House. If you go back to the Mueller report, it's about a presidential campaign and things that happened there. This is about something he did in the presidency. And using, obviously, our foreign relations, our national security, with a key country in the area of, obviously, Eastern Europe. And he was doing it for his personal gain, being the presidential. And therefore, there's a lot of, remember, it's not so much the impeachment that I support, it's the impeachment inquiry, and to see whether what happened here warrants some other further action by the United States House of Representatives, and then the Senate.
So up until this point, up until this development with Ukraine, you were not supporting impeachment or an impeachment?
Yeah, I don't think it was at that point. There's both a political consequence. Impeachments are about politics. But this is different. What happened here is different. And what he did is different. I mean, I've sat in, Phil, both for President Clinton and President Obama, in either both meetings and phone calls. I've never seen a president say in the middle of a phone call, we're about to give you this military aid, but we want you to do something for us.
Although according to the rough transcript.
And remember, this is not a transcript.
It's a rough transcript.
It is a summary And here's why
In the summary, he never says that we're about to give you this military aid. In fact, his supporters, as you know, say there's no evidence of a quid pro quo.
First of all, they put a hold on the military aid.
It's not alluded to in the phone call.
They put a no. Why do you think the phone call happens? Because you have a very important ally, or somebody we're wooing into Western Europe, into the European norms of the law and the economic union. He is facing a hostile Russia. He relies on America. America is wobbly. The military aid, the reason the phone call is somewhat established is because the military, the thumb is on it. And the president, first of all, you shouldn't be raising it. Full stop. This is not open to interpretation, quid pro quo. Full stop. You don't raise it. No president's ever raised something about their own about another American citizen being investigated. Now, what's weird, one, the entire effort with Ukraine is to get politics out of their criminal justice system. What is President Trump asking him to do? Put politics back into the criminal justice system. But number two, wait a second, Phil. Number two, if you follow the rule of law in the United States, and you hand over the whistleblower stuff to the Intelligence Committee, which is not interpretive, it's not a multiple choice question, it would all be in the Intelligence Committee, secret. I think it's a bad precedent, number three, for private, professional phone calls between heads of state to be out. But because of the way they handled it at the Trump administration, it's now out. So fourth, what's happened here, what is a real consequence, is you are involving a foreign government in digging up dirt on a potential American political challenger. That is a major challenge, and that's worthy of an investigation.
Back to the issue of the quid pro quo, the fact that his supporters are saying today that since he didn't specifically mention the military aid, since he didn't specifically say, if you want this aid, then I want your investigators to cooperate with our Justice Department. That doesn't hold water for you.
Phil, Donald Trump famously said once, I can shoot somebody in the middle of the day on Fifth Avenue and not get into any trouble. We're going to test whether he's right or not. You have a president of the United States. Ronald Reagan hasn't done this. George Bush hasn't done this. Bill Clinton hasn't done it. Barack Obama. Say to a foreign head of state, I would like you to have your criminal justice system and your prosecutor look into a political opponent of mine. That's what's said. And and here's the other thing you got to know. Multiple agencies in the United States, CIA, Defense, State, all have this phone call. So there's not one transcript. Ukraine has it. Russia has it. The reason they're letting this out is not because Donald Trump thinks he's okay. They're letting it out because our president is compromised. And at any time, either Ukraine or Russia have that same transcript. They can put it out at any time. That is why this is out. This has nothing to do with the full kimono. Give me a break. You believe that? I got a bridge over the Tigris River you could buy.
You were in the White House when the president was facing impeachment. You left shortly after the impeachment vote was taken and passed. What is it like inside a White House when something like that is happening?
Well, today already, they've actually done something dramatically different than what we've done. I don't think it's a good idea. If you really look at what Donald Trump was trying to say today was, all these things are going on, you're not paying attention. Then he played very political. We assiduously said to Bill Clinton, you have whenever you get a question, you got your job to do, or respect that. I got my job to do on behalf of the American people, and I'm going to do that. And he left all the questions in and around anything to deal with the impeachment or the inquiry by Ken Starr to the rest of the staff or other people that we walled it off from the president so he could stay focused. Now, here's the one thing.
Do you think he was able to do that? I mean, it seems superhuman to be able to compartmentalize that way.
Bill, you guys used to do stories about it all the time. How does he do this? You used to do your stories like this.
About his compartmentalizing?
Yeah, you did it. Go back, Google it. You still do that, don't you?
Sometimes.
Number two, here's what's interesting. When Bill Clinton was going through the impeachment process, his job approval was 71%. Good economy. Donald Trump you could make an argument, good, bad. People think it's a healthy economy, very low unemployment. He's at 43%. He's on very thin ice as it relates to what the American people put up. And remember, you're in the beginning stages of the information. You're not at the end of this. You're nowhere close. We haven't had the whistleblower yet. This is like an onion getting peeled. This is not going to get, let me say this. It gets better for Donald Trump. This, as more information gets out, it gets worse. Which one do you think it's going to be? Okay, so this is the beginning part, and we only know a summary of one phone call.
A rough summary, a rough transcript, as they're calling it. What is the potential impact on Democrats? For example, the conventional wisdom in some quarters is this is going to energize the president's base, and that ultimately it could backfire on Democrats in that you talk about the president's support level being in the 40s. Could it possibly work to his advantage in some way and hurt Democrats?
Yeah, I think it depends how you do it. If it's seen, the mistake that the Republicans made with Bill Clinton is they were seen as overtly political. People didn't condone what Bill Clinton did, but they knew it was wrong to rise to the level of an impeachment. So I would say that the best and the best policy, the best politics, and the right thing to do for the country, given now it's raised to this level, is to be judicious and just get to the bottom of it and the facts. If you are overt about the politics and relish the question about what is the political implication, the American people will smell a rat. And so the right thing to do is just go to the facts, uncover them. Don't tell people what, and I don't know whether this is worthy of an impeachment. I do think it's worthy of an impeachment inquiry because you have a president who's involving a foreign power and another head of state and another criminal justice system and digging up dirt on a political opponent.
You were a member of Congress.
Did you ever, anywhere in our studies of U.S. history, do you remember that?
No, I don't.
Okay, so this is totally new. We're in uncharted territory, which it breaks the norm. And remember, what's ironic about this whole thing, Phil, in the day the President of the United States is telling the UN and the rest of the world, the day for the globalists is over, the day for patriots is here. The phone call with the Ukrainian president is not about being a patriot. It's about doing something very unpatriotic.
Let's fast forward. Let's say that this impeachment inquiry leads to a vote on articles of impeachment. Do you see any scenario where the Senate would actually convict?
It would be wrong for me to answer that because my first answer to you, just like to the last question, is we're in the beginning stages of getting to the bottom of the information. I don't know. I do know this. It's politically perilous for everybody. Get to the facts and let the facts tell you what the consequences should be. Can't predict it.
We're almost out of time. I'd like to ask you just a couple of general questions. First of all, your take on how your successor is doing in her first few months as mayor.
Here's the thing. I'm a citizen and resident of the city of Chicago. I wish her well. I wish, obviously, the city well. It's a great city. I'm not going to get involved. I never did that on my predecessor. I'm not going to do that to my successor. It's not right for me as a former mayor. She wants help. I'm available in any way in which, and I'm available for the city, but I will not comment on it. It's not appropriate.
And well, let me ask you about yourself. How are you doing in the months since you've left office? Are you still glad you chose not to run again?
Yeah, look, I have a very full life. There's a lot of benefits, and Amy and I are able to do things. I did the bike trip I want to do. Amy and I went on a trip together, just ourselves, to Croatia. I have more time with my children, a lot more difference and a balance. I love the city. I want it to continue to build and be the world-class great city that it is. But after 25 years, from the Clinton White House to Congress, to the Obama White House to the city, I've been blessed and honored, but it was also the right decision, and there's no regrets to it.
Rahm Emanuel, thank you so much for joining us. Very much appreciated.
Thanks, Phil.
And now to Carol Marine and what some local political analysts have to say about the impeachment inquiry. Carol.
Phil, thank you. The memo of the call that was just released between President Donald Trump and the Ukrainian president is going to be poured over in the days and weeks to come. It is already viewed very differently on either side of the partisan divide. Joining us are Jennifer Nevins, who was a Trump delegate to the 2016 Republican National Convention and describes herself as a pro-Trump conservative activist, and Tom Bowen, a political consultant and co-founder of New Chicago Consulting, who's worked on a number of Democratic campaigns. Welcome back, both of you, to Chicago tonight. So, Jennifer, Your reaction when Nancy Pelosi announced this inquiry?
You know, there's three things. I think one, of course, the normal disgust, I think that all Trump supporters feel. I think that there is a sense of relief. I mean, this train has been sitting in the depot. We knew it was going to come down the line. We've been waiting for it. We knew it was going to happen before the next election, and it's coming down the pike. So there is kind of that feeling of relief that it's coming. And I think, you know, some people would have a hard time believing this, but I think a lot of us are kind of excited because we think this is going to only benefit Trump and the supporters in the country as a whole.
So, Tom, President Trump is already the subject of any number of probes, investigations, looking into his administration. So the question is, does a formal impeachment inquiry really make any difference?
Sure. This is the occupant of the highest office in the land doing something that I think most Americans would consider quite low. He has asked a foreign government to investigate an American citizen, his political opponent, something that would benefit only him. So I think what will change here is not nuts and bolts procedures, but it'll focus the country on something that most Americans would find absolutely despicable and reveal the character of this president.
Nancy Pelosi was very reluctant to do this, mostly worried that it would have real implications for the Democratic balance in the House, the upcoming elections. Is it going to screw up Democrats' hopes of getting reelected?
I think there was reason to be cautious and to approach this very gingerly because this is a extremely grave thing to do, and the moderate Democrats in the caucus who are in those Trump districts felt it would be better to focus on more issues. But at some point, politics doesn't matter. You have to do the right thing, and that is what 7 freshman national security background Democrats said in an opinion editorial in the Washington Post. That was important in the caucus, that galvanized the caucus, and the Speaker leads as much as follows the will of her members, and I think the members have decided it's time.
Jennifer, do you think that this effort is going to get traction with the public in a way that previous controversies did not?
You know, it's interesting. When Clinton was going through this in '98, the big warning from Democrats and the media was that you were going to elevate Clinton's status to this underdog place that he was going to have. And what happened? They were right. Clinton did very well in his reelection effort. So I do think that the Democrats are really putting themselves in peril here, and I think that that's going to be the end result, that Trump is going to be elevated. It's not going to gain traction with the public. The middle that decides elections, not the far right and not the far left, but the middle, I don't think they're going to buy it, and I think all the warning signs are there. His approval ratings are a problem. The Washington Post came out and said that today, that this signals a danger for Democrats. His approval numbers are in a spot that they are taking an enormous risk.
Speaking of Democrats, could this backfire, Tom, on Joe Biden?
I think the issue that Vice President Biden has is more doing two things at once, which is engaging in a general election discussion such as this, while at the same time running in a very complex primary system. You know, you have to go through 58 contests. I'm sure he would relish the opportunity to be in the same frame with Donald Trump at any given moment because of how unpopular he is in the party. But I don't think the risk here is really with Vice President Biden. The greater risk could be just the rest of the Democratic field, having the oxygen sucked out of them because the country will be focused very much on this.
Jennifer, would it trouble you if, in fact, it was demonstrated that President Trump was withholding military aid to Ukraine in order to pressure them to come to some political offering of negative information on an opponent?
I think if it was a clear-cut situation where he said, if you don't do this, if you do this, I will not do something, that would be a different case for me. That's not what we have here. We don't know, by the way, what Obama did in any of his phone calls because they weren't being surveilled. So I find it really interesting when people want to attack what's going on in Trump's phone calls when we have no idea what Obama was up to with the Iranian mullahs or anything else. So yes, if it were a clear-cut case and we didn't have Democrats parsing things out and we could judge for ourselves with the full transcript, yes, then it would trouble me. That is not, however, what is going on here.
Scandal fatigue, Tom? Is there scandal fatigue in Washington that's not going to allow this to gain any traction?
There's fatigue in this presidency because this president doesn't run the office the way it has before. But I think the American people are smart enough to know that, you know, when your child's sick, it doesn't matter how tired you are, how fatigued you are. You still go and do the right thing. You take care of them. So I have confidence in the American people that they'll focus on the facts, and the facts, as we see them today, are damning. As we anticipate they may come out in the future, we believe will be worse, because we've seen what this president does. He only cares about himself. He uses the power of his office to benefit himself, and he did it against an American citizen. So imagine if he did it to the Vice President of the United States. Imagine what he would do to you if you were just average person on the street. So I don't think the American people have any problem focusing.
I would imagine Jennifer disagrees with that.
Yeah, I would definitely disagree with that. The Democrats want to cloak everything that they do, that we are doing this high and mighty thing, we're protecting the democracy, the republic. This is their fourth bite at the apple. If it wasn't the emoluments clause, what he was doing in Russia, Trump's Muslim ban, supposed Muslim ban, now it's the situation with Ukraine. This is just another opportunity for them to do that. So they like to cloak it in this type of, they're doing this nobility, but I don't even think the Democrats really buy what they're saying, and I don't think the vast swath of the American public believe it either.
All the Democrats are going to do is just show the American people who he is, and that's enough.
The Democrats are showing the American people who they are, is what they're doing right now.
We're comfortable with that.
How do you see it playing out, though? Do you see it going to articles of impeachment and going to the Senate, or not?
I would say at this point, 218 Democrats have formally said yes to an inquiry. I think that number will grow tomorrow and the day after. I would say probably within the next few weeks or potentially a few days, the inquiry vote comes. The article votes will come in a matter of probably months.
Before the Iowa caucuses?
Before the Iowa caucuses, and then at that point it is up to Leader McConnell on how the Senate trial will proceed. But everything right now points to articles of impeachment will be voted on the House floor, and I believe they will pass.
Is that how you see it, Jennifer?
I am not sure. I tend to think that this inquiry is a clever way for Nancy Pelosi to look like she is taking this concern seriously. To respond to her hard left caucus, she can say that, yes, I am doing this. I think the moderates are nervous. I think that they can look like they are doing something by pushing this inquiry. But at the end of the day, I would be surprised if this went full bore impeachment.
Jennifer Nevins, Tom Bowen, thank you very much for being with us tonight. More ahead on Chicago Tonight. Stay with us.
Teachers are not the only city employees dissatisfied with the contract offer. Amanda Vinicky has that story and more of what's making news in Chicago tonight. Amanda.
Phil, 2,000 Chicago Park District employees could hit the picket line in the next few weeks. Members of the SEIU 73 union have voted to authorize a strike. It'd be the first in the Park District's 85-year history. They want a pay raise higher than 2% and for part-time workers to receive pay and benefits equal to full-timers. It comes as Mayor Lori Lightfoot's administration is contending with two other potential strikes. Chicago Public Schools support staff, who are also members of SEIU, have approved a walkout if bargaining doesn't lead to an agreement. And we should learn tomorrow night whether CPS teachers will likewise be ready to leave the classroom in an attempt to get their demands met. Teachers union members are in their second day of a 3-day strike authorization vote. You can read about the latest on those negotiations on our website. Meanwhile, striking University of Chicago Medical Center nurses are back on the job and back to bargaining a new contract after a 5-day work disruption. We have an update to a story we brought you a few weeks ago when several early learning centers learned they would no longer receive state and federal dollars. Today, the city of Chicago is announcing it will use about $6 million in city funds to help those organizations. Department of Family and Support Services Commissioner Lisa Morrison Butler says that means about 25 agencies that had been defunded will now receive funding through June 2020 so that agencies and families can make alternate plans. The MacArthur Foundation chose a local urban designer and a local illustrator as winners of its prestigious Genius Grants. Chicago Tonight featured one of them just last week, Emmanuel Pratt, the director of a nonprofit that seeks to transform vacant buildings and lots on the south side into spaces for education and community.
We had an opportunity to do a very different approach to development, not just looking at single bottom line return on investment. We started looking at a regenerative neighborhood development strategy that is triple bottom line, people, planet, and profit.
Another MacArthur genius is Linda Berry, a cartoonist and graphic novelist with Chicago roots who now teaches in Madison, Wisconsin. 26 total recipients each receive a $625,000 no strings attached grant. More on our website. As for the weather, mostly cloudy tonight with a low around 55 degrees, then sunny tomorrow with a high near 71. And now, Phil, back to you.
Thanks, Amanda. Still to come on Chicago Tonight, dancing down memory lane with two original Chicago cast members of the hit Hamilton. How law enforcement and divorce attorneys can get their hands on iPass data. Our Spotlight Politics team on the latest local official to see his office raided by the FBI. And how a new digitization program is making family memories accessible anywhere. But first, some of today's top business headlines from Crain's. Here's Ann Dwyer.
Phil, the corporate parent of Arby's, Sonic Drive-Ins, and Buffalo Wild Wings, is adding Jimmy John's to its widening roster of restaurant chains. Inspire Brands announced today it will acquire Jimmy John's for an undisclosed amount. Jimmy John's, which was founded in downstate Illinois, currently has more than 2,800 locations. The founder, Jimmy John Leotode, will step down as board chairman and become an advisor to the chain. The merger will make Inspire the fourth largest restaurant operator in the United States, with more than $14 billion in annual sales and more than 11,000 locations. The deal is expected to close by late October. Meanwhile, customer satisfaction at Chicago's two airports continues to suffer from construction delays and surging passenger volumes. That's according to the latest J.D. Power survey of passengers at North American airports. O'Hare ranked near dead last in a list comparing passenger satisfaction levels at mega airports across the United States. O'Hare edged out only Los Angeles and Newark's airports on a list of major U.S. facilities. Midway did slightly better, but still ranked below average in a list comparing large airports. And if you're looking for a job at McDonald's, you can now apply for it just by saying Alexa or OK Google. McDonald's is allowing applicants to start job searches via any Alexa or Google Assistant-enabled device. The Chicago-based fast food giant says the job application portal is the first voice-initiated application process ever. Users start by saying, Alexa, help me get a job at McDonald's. Or on Google, the wording is, OK Google, talk to McDonald's, apply through. The online assistant takes it from there, connecting you to McDonald's jobs boards. For Crain's Chicago Business and chicagobusiness.com, I'm Ann Dwyer. Back to you, Phil.
Thanks, Ann. It was this week 3 years ago that Chicago audiences were introduced to the smash hit Hamilton, the first city in the country to receive the production outside New York. In January, when the curtain does fall on the hip-hop musical's run in Chicago, it will have been seen by more fans here than on Broadway. Brandis Friedman looks back with two of the show's longest-running performers, including the actor who plays the man himself.
As the theater sits empty just moments before the show, a throng of Hamilton fans wait not so patiently to get inside.
We came all the way from Alaska to see it.
I've read everything I could about it. I have done everything, and now I'm here to actually witness it.
I've seen it 6 before this.
So this makes 7?
This makes 7, and I've seen it in December before it goes away.
So you don't like the show very much?
No, not at all.
These fans have the hottest ticket in town.
My mom was like, you're a freshman, treat yourself, and she was like, buy a ticket, and here I am.
A last shot to see Hamilton in Chicago before it closes early next year. Some are parents surprising their daughters.
I'm freaking out right now. I didn't cry. I was close.
And die-hard fans who come alone.
I'm by myself. I can't always get people to come with me.
And once they get into the room where it happens, a 3-hour journey through the life of America's founding father, Alexander Hamilton, brought to life by this man, Miguel Cervantes, who's played the role since opening night.
It's a huge responsibility that I put on myself to make sure that all the people that are sitting out there get what they came here for. You know, and I have been given this honor and this privilege to be the guy that says all of these words. I want everyone to think that I left it all out there on the stage.
When he learned he got the role of A. Ham, he came to the performance with no expectations of how long it would last in Chicago. Who knew that it'd blow us all away? The part he'll miss the most, connecting with fans.
You know, standing outside of this theater every night and, you know, if someone is sort of crying or shaking, recounting their emotional experience in the theater, that's a pretty powerful exchange that we have had. And I am thankful that we have gotten to share this moment.
On stage with him every night is Aubin Wise. She plays the third, often forgotten Schuyler sister Peggy in the first act, and also Mariah Reynolds, the seductive woman Hamilton can't say no to in the second act. Aubin is able to laugh when looking back at some of the show's funnier moments that audiences never noticed.
I did this show until I was 7 months pregnant, where it started to get a little edgy with me in the show is going down on my knees for Say No to This. Every single night, I would just hold on tighter and tighter to Miguel. So he would like slowly let me down onto the ground. So that got a little like, ooh, okay, hopefully I don't go into labor tonight, you know, so.
But she's also played backup for other leading roles, the other two Schuyler sisters, meaning if one actor is out that night, Aubin is in. It might seem like a lot of work.
So that was really fun coming in just because I never knew who I was going to play that night. I had to think of like harmonies and blocking and just like all the moving parts of covering the sisters.
But the people in these seats would never know it.
It's cool because I always try to find new moments in the show. We have an entire alternate cast backstage. So anytime somebody comes in, steps in for a role, it flips the energy a little bit. So it keeps it exciting.
By the time the curtain falls on Hamilton in Chicago, it will have been seen by more than 2.6 million people, over 1,341 performances, and 171 weeks.
You know, one of the times I came here, there was a woman who had never seen it before, and she screamed when they went in intermission, like just, and we're all like, what's wrong? She said, this is so awesome. Does everyone else know how awesome this is? Like, yeah, we know. We know.
And tickets for that last performance on January 5th already sold out. For Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman.
So far, Hamilton's stay on Broadway in New York City is still open-ended. More than 6 million iPass transponders have been issued in Illinois. Chances are you have one. Those transponders track the movement of tollway customers, and according to new reporting by WBEZ, that data is often shared with law enforcement and divorce attorneys, causing unease among privacy advocates. Here to tell us more is the reporter who broke the story, Tony Arnold, state politics reporter for WBEZ, and welcome back to Chicago Tonight. First of all, Tony, how did this story come about?
It came about, subpoenas in Illinois are public records, and I filed a simple request to see what's going on at the tollway, who's issuing subpoenas, and the response I got back initially was, well, which ones do you want? And from there I found out that actually the tollway is subpoenaed regularly. In fact, you could say frequently by just law enforcement, divorce attorneys, and all sorts of different court matters.
Spell out to us, one seems a little more obvious than the other until you think about it. But first of all, law enforcement issuing subpoenas.
They do this most frequently. It's everything from your local police department looking for a stolen vehicle to U.S. prosecutors, the feds looking into everything from murder to gun trafficking to child sex trafficking. It can get quite serious. The way that they told me that they use this information, both prosecutors and police officers and former prosecutors, is that they tend to look at the initial stages of an investigation, seeing somebody's travel movements to get a sense of where they are, how frequently they're on the tollway, and also to see if there's what kind of financial transactions are going on. If, for instance, your iPass, you probably have a credit card hooked up to that, so they can see then the credit card information that's attached to an iPass transponder, and then use that to see then go to the credit card company and see what kind of expenses are going on there.
Okay, that seems pretty legit as a law enforcement tool, but how about divorce attorneys using it?
Well, divorce attorneys use this. You might think that they do this to catch somebody cheating, but many divorce attorneys I've gotten to know in reporting this process, I've not needed one myself, but I've learned that they do this at this point in the divorce process. They probably know that somebody's already been cheating. So it's more used to see if somebody is actually around to take care of the kids in a custody fight, or if somebody says that they are, in fact, staying at home every night, watching TV, and actually have a side job that they haven't disclosed that income in a fight over alimony. They can pull the toll records and say, well, why are you going out to Elgin every night at 5 o'clock then? Or, it looks like you're going to the casino a lot when you say that you're watching the kids. So they use it to catch the other person in a lie, basically.
Excuse me. There's a person who you call Ellen. It's just it's not her real name. You're protecting the identity. Oh, briefly, what was Ellen's story?
Ellen's story is that she had a child with her now ex-boyfriend, and the ex-boyfriend she described as starting to more frequently stalk her. Basically, he would send her frequently text messages or even letters in the mail daily, and she described him in an order of protection as getting obsessive, and to the point that she actually got this order of protection out against him. He then was able to open a lawsuit against a third party. Ellen was not even a party of this lawsuit, issued the subpoena to the tollway and obtained her toll records, and not to mention all of her contact information that she had changed to try to make it harder for him to get in contact with her, from address to cell phone, email address, even some of the basic rudimentary information about credit card and driver's license.
That's really interesting that somebody, by generating a subpoena in connection with any lawsuit, can access a person's iPass records, which then in turn allows them to get to other records. But in the case of Ellen, she had no idea this was going on. What's the deal?
She didn't even know that this had been happening. The tollway did not tell her they were turning this information over. She didn't know that the lawsuit even existed until after he already had her information. And so at that point, it was too late for her.
So what is the tollway doing in terms of these privacy concerns?
Well, the executive director, in response to the story, said that he's interested in working with lawmakers, state lawmakers, to see what can be done. Governor J.B. Pritzker also said through a spokeswoman that he's looking into the issue. I don't quite know what that means yet. Other states, a lot of other states who have tollways, don't necessarily also have any state laws that forbid this practice from even happening. In California, for instance, they have a warrant requirement for law enforcement to use this information. And even then, when police do issue a warrant, they have to tell the person, we're pulling your toll records, unless the warrant says otherwise. But that's extreme. Most states don't have that. So Illinois right now, lawmakers are taking a look at this. They're going to see, should law enforcement need a warrant? Is a subpoena enough? On the civil side, is there any way to restrict this information? One privacy advocate said, well, if the tollway doesn't have the information, maybe a creepy ex-boyfriend can't get it, so maybe the tollway should just get rid of it sooner than they do now.
Tony Arnold, thank you for your briefing. Very much appreciated.
Yeah, thanks, Phil.
And up next, the latest FBI raid on a politician's office. Our Spotlight team tackles that story and more, so stay with us.
Don't miss one of our stories. Get them all delivered to your desktop or mobile device with a subscription to the WTTW News Daily Briefing. Go to WTTW.com/daily briefing and sign up.
It's almost become commonplace, the FBI raiding a politician's office in broad daylight. It happened again this week as federal agents swarmed the office and home of a state senator from Chicago. We'll get into that and more with our Spotlight Politics team of Amanda Vinicky, Paris Schutz, and Carol Marine. All right, before we get to the latest raid, let's briefly touch on what we've been talking about at the top of the show, and that has to do with impeachment. Paris, potential impact on next year's elections.
It's a tricky political calculus for both sides, Phil. At least in Illinois, there's some congressional districts in the suburbs that Republicans lost that they want to get back. And Trump is not popular, at least not as popular as in some other red districts throughout the country. So the few statements that I've seen today from some vying for the Republican nomination didn't really defend Trump explicitly, but did call out sort of the Democratic incumbents that they're taking on. But you notice more and more Democrats in Congress, moderate Democrats now from purple districts, are getting on the impeachment train, which suggests that Democrats believe that either from what they've seen or what they're about to see, there's enough there that all but the Trump diehards are going to find worth investigating.
Carol, I was interested to hear the Trump supporter who you just spoke to in an earlier segment say that right now there's not enough information to convince her, but even she acknowledged that if it were to be established that there was a quid pro quo, that would be different.
Though she doesn't believe there will be one. I mean, I think the thing that we're dealing with here is whatever the Democrats do, they've got to do it pretty quickly and expeditiously. The Iowa caucuses are the launch of the 2020 campaign, and they are in the beginning of February. So this is going to need to be quick, clear, and I think in this particular case, digestible for the American public.
Boy, February is not very far away at all, is it? Amanda, let's switch gears locally. This time the feds appear to be after State Senator Marty Sandoval. Tell us who he is.
To be clear here, there have been no criminal charges filed, although there was agent activity, the FBI, we believe also the IRS at his Cicero district office, and then raids again at the state capitol and in his home. Sandoval is chair of the Senate's Transportation Committee and has been for a while. He is actually, in fact, one of the longest serving state senators. He's been in the Senate since 2003. And for really the past decade, he's been heading up this Transportation Committee, which is a big deal, particularly now, of course, because Illinois has its first capital bill as well in a decade. That means a whole lot of money spent on construction projects. That is something that Sandoval really tried hard for. We saw, I think, some video of him in a committee calling for passage of an infrastructure plan like this. So he has a lot of say in what exactly those projects
He wanted
are.
to raise the gas tax more than it actually got raised.
But, you know, let's dial back here. Marty Sandoval goes back to the Hispanic Democratic Organization, which Mayor Daley launched in order to win votes and hand out patronage. It turned into a scandal with the hired truck scandal. Marty Sandoval comes out of the extremely interesting town of Cicero. He
extremely interesting.
Extremely.
Is that a new motto?
Yeah, I would call it. He was a friend of Danny Solis. Danny Solis, let's never forget. We now know wore a wire for 2 years, an unheard of amount of time. Marty Sandoval happens to share his district with Mike Madigan and Ed Burke. And so when we talk about the constellation of federal interest and the giant canopy of people being touched by the feds and the optics of this huge federal raid in 3 different locations in broad daylight, do you think the feds are sending a message?
Perhaps. So Paris, this is the second Senate Democrat facing scrutiny. What does it say about the culture in Springfield?
Well, Senate President John Cullerton said today that he knew nothing about this raid, that he's worried about it, but Senator Sandoval is not going to lose his committee chairmanship at this point. There's Tom Cullerton, who's indicted, who's not going to lose his committee chairmanship. Well, he got a different
one and got another one.
And that means a little bit more money and a little bit more prestige. But I want to pick up on what Carol said is Kerry Austin raid, Ed Burke raid, Sandoval raid, all made for TV.
Zalewski raid.
Well, but these were made for TV. You see, federal investigators like they're in Law and Order marching out with bags that say evidence, and I just wonder if they're trying to send a message to people that know they're on the hot seat right now, or people that could be cooperators, that we mean business right now. And when they make a big public spectacle like that, they're not going to do it without some kind of charges coming forward. They could have done it not in office hours or daylight hours. They could have done it by calling Senator Sandoval and say, we need some stuff from you. I mean, this is a big public spectacle.
Sandoval. I want to point out, we have not heard it all from Sandoval. There's speculation as to what this could be because, as Carol alluded to, he has his fingers in all sorts of places. He's not just a state senator. He's had contracts for, I believe he calls it translation services, working for some of these communities.
For the town
which,
of Cicero.
Receive money under the Capital Bill and under the infrastructure program. So there is a whole lot there. We haven't heard from him, but we do have reporting in from, for example, the Chicago Tribune saying that they have a source that says this is allegedly for using his elected office to somehow steer business to a company and then get kickbacks from it. But again, this could dovetail with so many other things, given just that this is a vast web of a political web.
This sign that the feds are giving through theatrics, if you want to call it that way, of bringing out bags that say evidence and so forth. Are people paying attention?
People are paying attention, and this is the other thing, and we've talked about this before. There's also a federal investigation involving John Coley, a big-time Teamster who hooks up with Senator Cullerton, but who also hooks up with a giant production house, CineSpace. One has to wonder, and the prosecutor in all of this is the same prosecutor, Amar Bachu. So I tend to wonder if the canopy of these investigations is far wider, deeper, greater, and we've only begun to see the dimensions.
Amanda Vinicky, Parashutz, Carol Marine, thank you all. Family memories may be timeless, but the photos capturing those memories may not be. That's why the Robert F. Smith Fund with the National Museum of African American History and Culture is traveling across the country with its mobile museum to preserve family archives in their community curation project. Arts correspondent Angel Edo takes a look during their Chicago tour.
One person places an image on a photo table, a second person captures the image with a digital camera, and a third person sizes it. In 3 swift motions, someone's family history has been preserved. The Community Curation Project with the National Museum of African American History and Culture is working to preserve family histories across the country, and the latest city on their tour is Chicago.
We've seen everything from etchings from the late 19th century. We've seen membership cards from the Pullman Porters. We've seen membership certificates from fraternities and sororities. We've just seen so much, and to not just see the items, but to actually interact with the individuals bringing those items in and seeing their eyes light up to talk about their family members and their ancestors.
Before the images hit one of the still image stations, they're categorized by size and labeled by the owner. That's where we found retired Chicago Public Schools teacher Marcia Ewell.
This is an article of African Americans who looked white, so they had an article.
She shares an article about her family featured in Ebony magazine. She's not only digitizing the magazine's article, but an original family photo that was also captured for the magazine.
Wow, oh my gosh. And that's this picture right here that was on our mantle.
Ewell is eager to explore her family tree with her grandchildren.
I think it's wonderful. It's my roots. And I've never taken one of those DNA tests, but I know I can go back to my grandparents.
Now, if you're interested in digitizing some of your family's history, no problem. They've got a museum on wheels with everything you need to preserve those home videos. It features a video rack with every machine possible to capture film and audio. They transfer videos to a flash drive folks can then take home. Conservation specialist Candace Mings says she enjoys preserving videos. She says they capture something photos do not.
Seeing that person, hearing their voice, it's a lot more moving than a still image. Not that still image is also not important, but hearing my dad's laugh, for example. I can't hear that in a photo, but I can hear it from home movies.
The Community Curation Project is just one part of the Smith Fund's Great Migration program. Memories are digitized daily at the museum in Washington, D.C. for anyone who makes an appointment. But not everyone can make it to the nation's capital.
We can get to places that museums can't go. We can be the museum on the road.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Angel Ito.
The Community Curation Project continues here until September 28th. Still and moving digitizing sessions are available at Evanston Township High School and Chicago State University by appointment. The next stop on the tour is New Orleans. And that is our show for this Wednesday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And please join us tomorrow night live at 7. More on the impeachment inquiry of President Donald Trump. And some might call it old school 3D printing. We learn about a unique souvenir machine with Chicago roots dating back more than 50 years. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Phil Ponce, and I thank you for watching. Good night.
Closed captioning for this program is brought to you by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, dedicated to preserving the dignity and rights of all individuals.